as we promised during the workshops, we wanted to have a follow-up and kind of report out and give a little bit of a status update on the workshops for the Regions 2 and 3 Westwide Energy Corridor Review. And we posted a summary of the workshops and the findings and the interests and the ideas that came from those. And we apologize that it was just a little bit late. It's right here in the middle of the screen. We see here that there's a summary of the Region 2 and 3 workshop. You can read over it. We won't do that here today, but I wanted to give you all a status update on where we're at, kind of give a brief overview from a holistic perspective, and answer any questions that folks may have as well. Again, I'm Jeremy Bloom. I'm the National Project Manager for the Westwide Energy Corridor Review. This webinar isn't necessarily intended to be a forum for further input and gathering about corridors ideas, but I want to invite folks to give me a call or email me if you want to discuss something along those lines. I do want to thank everybody for their participation in the workshops, which the agencies felt like were a really great success because we felt like we came away with a much better understanding of the interests and the issues that need to be considered within the process of our land management planning. And I hope everyone will continue to engage throughout the remainder of this process like you are today. But more importantly than even today is when we develop our draft report and we can put that out later this fall. We hope that we'll get your review and your comments when we release that so that the agencies can further develop and have a solid groundwork that's needed for the management of the plan, for the work, not just for the management of one particular use or one particular resource, but so that we can responsibly have the development as well as minimize resource loss as we move forward through time, so that we really maintain the lands for future generations. Is everybody hearing me okay? Just wanted to make sure that everything's going okay.
Okay. Yeah, fine.
Okay. Great. So that summary is there. I invite you all to review that if you haven't already. Jim, if we could open it up, though, I did want to talk about just the table and review the quarters that we looked at during the meetings. And obviously, we couldn't review, like we mentioned in the workshops, we couldn't review all the quarters. There's just too many and not enough time. But these quarters that we reviewed, 20 in all, were really valuable to us because we were able to see some similar issues that kept coming up and how we can address those or approach mitigating certain issues and finding better ways to find compatibilities. And then we also had some ideas about corridor additions as well as corridor deletions. And so some of those are noted here. And similarly today, we won't be able to discuss every idea or interest from the workshops, but we wanted to make good on our commitment to engaging with our stakeholders throughout this process because we want to explain how we are developing those ideas from the workshops and integrating those into not just these 20 corridors, but all the corridors as these ideas are applicable. And so we're right now going through that and developing some summaries and some ideas and how we can specifically make adjustments, revisions, refinements, call it what you will, but ways where we can see enhancement and improvement to the corridors so that they work better for utilization, but also in the same breath, that they better work from a resource standpoint and more compatible, better thought through, more consistent. And so we came away with some specific ideas on potential revisions to improve the corridor network, as well as some additions and deletions. And we'll be bringing those forward here. And hopefully we're really seeking equilibrium between the useful network of corridors as well as maintaining those treasured landscapes. And so with that, I thought we could maybe just start with an example that we could proxy of how we're taking some of the ideas that were brought forward from the workshop and kind of extrapolating that across more areas than just that singular corridor. So could Jim maybe bring up the image we have for the corridor for the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest? Great, thank you. Okay, so what we're showing here, what Jim's showing is we have the corridor as it exists today on this screen. And shown in green, the corridor follows a center line which was thought at the time, back in 2009, that this is exactly where the existing infrastructure lies on the landscape. And that is where the corridor was designated, and we kind of track that through GIS, which isn't exact, but it should be much, much closer than what it is. So as we come to find out, our data was slightly off, and now with our subscription to some energy infrastructure GIS information, we look in here and we see where the actual infrastructure does come across the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And so this is a prime example of a couple things. One, we see that we were slightly off because the mapping wasn't accurate enough at the time when these corridors were designated. We have an opportunity to adjust that and to follow what the original intent was, to follow the existing infrastructure where it shows the blue line. If you could toggle to the next image there. Okay, so this is something that came from the workshop. It's, like we would like to see this, shifted over to follow the existing infrastructure. It makes sense. But at the same time, one of the things that is looked at as well is we want to see about, is there an opportunity to provide for future capacity if necessary and manage that from a co-location standpoint. Well, in order to do that, it makes sense to not center a corridor over existing infrastructure. It makes sense to maybe offset it so that you have maximum space for finding a new path through there if the need arose. So with that, the option becomes, well, do you put this corridor, do you revise it on the north side or the south side? And some of the specifics that can come from that are, well, which resources are more sensitive or more important or more valued, and which makes more sense. And so it shook out in this case that it may make more sense to suggest that corridor shift to be to the south and still span the existing infrastructure, but provide that additional capacity if it's needed to, have it through the area that's of lesser resource conflict. And so this is an example of a good idea that came from the workshop, to where this idea doesn't have to sit only here on the National Forest. This idea can be applied across almost any corridor in any location where it makes sense. And so this is a prime example of one small tweak, that an idea that comes from that input that we've gathered, and we're looking to try to make these types of suggestions across all sorts of areas where the corridor network could be improved. And it just makes perfect sense, to try to, obviously we want these corridors to span over the existing infrastructure. If that needs to be corrected, let's do that. And then also how we do that makes a difference as well. And so we can take this so far, and then of course what we'll do again is pass this off to, in our report, this will kind of come out and you guys can comment on it. But then ultimately it will come back to the agencies for them to incorporate these changes or some variation of it based on a closer look at the time of land use planning through the full robust NEPA process for land use planning. So I wanted to just use this as a proxy, kind of an example of all the issues that have been brought up at all the different workshops. Were really valuable, and we really are able to apply those in different situations across all the corridors. And so I hope that people will continue to engage when we put that draft report out, and and review all the quarters that they may have interest in if it's, if we weren't able to discuss it previously. And so with that, I kind of wanted to put it out there that, that overall, I don't want to get too long-winded about this whole thing, but we wanted to invite folks if there were questions about anything in the summary. But here again, we don't want to get too far off tangent. So I'll just open it up for folks if they want to have any questions about the workshops or about the summary. Okay, so we have some questions in the chat box here. Where is the summary on the website? I think we've covered that. But you'll go back to show that. The website is the first announcement. The summary is just a hot link right there. And if you click on
we're
that,
also going to post it on the documents page, Jeremy.
Okay, Connie, thank you. Mike Hyde has a question here. Will comments submitted to the website rather than the workshop also be summarized and made available? Yes, all the comments we received, as Connie responded here, will be incorporated into that roll-up report. If folks have a question or anything, you can just speak it on the phone too. You don't necessarily need to type it all in. One comment or one question here in the chat: will we ever be able to see highlighted fashion in any changes being proposed to the existing corridors? So any potential revisions, like Jim's showing us here, we do want to show what that revision would look like. And so this would be an example of what that would be. We would show where the corridor was in gray, or where it exists today in gray, and the red line would be the revision. So that would be within the report. Every corridor will have a summary, and it will have particular ideas that will be addressed. And yeah, there will be a visual component to those. Liz,
That would be great, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Liz, your question is wondering if electric transmission line companies participated in any of the stakeholder meetings. Yeah, we had more than a couple, I believe. We had Rocky Mountain Power in our meeting in Grand Junction. Connie, do you recall?
Arizona Public Service. Arizona Public Service, and
okay.
And then if Jim goes back to the summary, there's a list of participants for each of the workshops at the end of that summary.
Thank you for that reminder, Connie.
Hi, this is Jeff Houses, chairman of the Ports of Apache Tribe, and I don't believe we were notified of the meeting in Albuquerque.
Well, Jeff, I am very, very sorry to hear that. I will have to look into that, but
okay. We could talk about it offline, but I just can't find the notification. They're
okay.
So I understand the quarters are 2 miles south of our reservation in southern New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah, please, would you give me a call just right after this? That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate that, Jeff. See, somebody's typing possibly another question here.
Jeremy,
Yes.
this is Carl Myers with Tri-State Generation and Transmission. We were unable to attend the workshop that was in Grand Junction, but we do have some input on refinement. Is the deadline passed? Are you still accepting confirmation or tweaks or suggestions from Cooler users?
Oh, I would say go ahead and submit your input, either now or at the time that we put the draft report out. It may be better to do so now.
Okay.
So if you want to, you can either send that to me or you can use the website to do so.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. Is there any other questions? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Georgianne, are you on the line? You would have to hit *6, otherwise we won't be able to hear you.
I'm on. I don't think
Okay.
I have anything to add.
Okay. Very good. Well, here Mike does have a comment here on the chat. Portion of corridor 66-259 was just burned up in a 60,000 acre Dollar Ridge fire in the Wasatch, Sheen County, Utah. Existing power line shut down for a time. This is one reason why we suggest that it's not a good corridor to pursue. And how will the study take fire-prone areas into account? Mike, that's a very good example of a challenge that is just one piece of the puzzle to be looked at. The reliability of all the electrical infrastructure across the entire nation is of tantamount importance. That's not just a BLM thing. That's a national interest, and that's something that we certainly consider within the context of planning, and it's much closerly looked at, if that's a word, closerly, when proponents bring forward a proposal, and it has a lot to do with the veg management, the siting. We do try to take that into consideration in our land use planning process when we're siting these things in the first place. And yet, the corridors themselves, oftentimes, because we try to co-locate when possible, without going down a complete rabbit trail, we do try to minimize disturbances on landscapes and still maintain the reliability. And it certainly is a challenge. It's an overall challenge of trying to maintain those rights of way within wherever they are to make sure that they're reliable. And fire is just it's just a part of reality that we deal with. So how will the study take fire-prone areas into account? But that's a real challenge. Not sure that we would address that too specifically, just because that changes from season to season, year to year, based on where there's more droughts, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but that's a good suggestion, though. That definitely is making me think. So we'll maybe give that a little bit more thought. I see, Lynn, you have a comment here as well in the chat. If folks want to support a proposed revision, how best can that be accomplished? I think one of the best ways to do that is going to be what's been brought forward so far. We were incorporating into the report. I think that one of the ways that folks can advocate for that is to review and comment those proposals that are there thus far, as well as continue to work with the agencies if other proposals are on the horizon, or whether that's additions, deletions, or just a revision. we would like to hear that. And so certainly our review is only going to happen for so long, and it won't be a continuous ongoing process. It'll be intermittent. And so I would say that in this case, I would say if you have other folks who are interested in supporting proposed revisions, I would ask them to review the draft report when we push that out, as well as engage with comment on that, and then also engage with the local agency offices. Rob's question here is, do we know when the draft report will be forthcoming? We're right now targeting and anticipating that we could get the draft report out in fall of this year. So I would guess mid-fall. Susan, you have a question here. In the San Luis Valley of Colorado, we have one line coming in to serve approximately 75,000 people. The line comes across a forested pass with beetle kill and prone to fire. Is this something you will consider? So when you mention that you have one line, I'm assuming you're talking about one transmission line. And as far as the coming across a forested pass with beetle kill, I guess you're wondering if that's more fire-prone area and that needs more redundancy. That would probably be something that would have to be considered more from a utility standpoint. Jim's going to take us there. Appreciate this, Jim. It'll help us to look at what we're talking about.
Is that the right place?
Suzanne, did you want to maybe just talk over the phone to tell us a little bit more about your concern?
Susan, I guess I'm not hearing anything. If you're trying to communicate, you'd have to push *6, but just not quite understanding the question. Who is that?
Jeremy, it's Carl Myers with Tri-State. We have a line that serves the San Luis Valley, and it goes across the Forest Service for 6 miles. We recently managed that right away and cleared vegetation, and we're presently working with the Forest Service on other vegetation management in the surrounding areas of the corridor to reduce the risk of fire. We're quite concerned with that facility and its protection, and so we're working through that process, and I can certainly talk with Susan with more detail about it. And maybe that could be a corridor added. I don't think it's present on the list.
Okay. Okay, so Susan mentions here that she's just on the computer and it's a lack of redundancy. There are possibility of other corridors. So I guess maybe I want to clarify that the corridors are more of a planning level of prescription for where we would want to see and drive future build-out for infrastructure, for major infrastructure, for electrical and oil and gas pipelines, hydrogen pipelines, major energy transmission projects. The corridors themselves are not a project or a infrastructure proposal. If there's any misunderstanding there, I wanted to clarify that. As well as when we plan for these things, we certainly do see the need to make sure that there's opportunities to have the widening of sideboards so that there is an ability by industry to meet the reliability standards that they're burdened with, to make sure that these things are developed properly, and whether that's separation or vegetation management. I will say that the agencies are looking at ways in which vegetation management can be enhanced, and that's an effort that's undergoing, but it's a much bigger effort than just this review. So redundancy and reliability, absolutely agree that that's a huge effort, a huge important issue that needs to be addressed. I know industry is always concerned to that as well, and the agencies work with them to the greatest of their extent as well. So, any other questions out there? Carl, I appreciate you chiming in on that, being that you have a little bit more specific knowledge. I do look forward to hearing from you if you have some ideas and input with regards to these things. I do want to invite others, if you do have other questions or want to speak about anything in particular or specifically, please do give me a call or email me. I can be reached at 208-373-3847 or davebluma@blm.gov. My contact information is on this website. It's on most of the invitations of everything, so we can also send out a response. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available for others who couldn't join today to just sort of watch and make sure that they didn't miss out on anything and were able to hear some of the findings and kind of how we're taking that information and synthesizing it and utilizing it across all of the Westside Energy corridors in regions 2 and 3, and then continue to carry this information forward. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're being transparent and offering folks opportunities to engage in this. I hope that you will remain engaged and review and comment on the draft report when that comes out later this fall. Mike has one more question here. How much time will be given to the review and comment on the draft report? Mike, I would anticipate it's a 30-day review. That's what we have programmed in. That's been our process thus far. So we anticipate putting that out there for a 30-day review sometime this fall. Well, with that, if there's no other questions, I'm going to say that this has been about as much as we wanted to cover here, but if there are things to talk about, please don't hesitate to call me. Jeff, I invite you, please call me right after this, and we can touch base and figure out what went on there. I just really appreciate everybody's involvement with this process. It really is helping the agencies to really come up with better ideas and to take in all the interests and ideas on how to better manage the lands for energy projects and make sure that it's as compatible as it can be out there for the landscapes. So with that, I think we'll sign off. I appreciate you all, and you all have a good rest of your week.